What's up, everyone? It's your boy Andre here with the NASM Peak Physique Podcast. Today's special guest is my good friend Wendy Fortino, 8-time Figure Olympian, former track athlete, and one of the most respected competitors and figures in the bodybuilding industry today. We're going to dive into longevity, athletic foundations, and how to evolve without losing your edge. Let's get into it. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. We'll see you guys soon.
Welcome to the Peak Physique Podcast, hosted by IFBB Olympian and NASM Master Trainer Andre Adams. This show delivers elite strategies and cutting-edge techniques to build your best body yet.
Hey guys, welcome back to the NASM Peak Physique Podcast. I'm your host, Andre Adams, NASM Master Trainer and IFBB Physique Olympian. Today, we've got a fun and motivational episode to share with you. We've also got a very special guest. On today's episode, we have an 8-time Figure Olympian, former track and field collegiate athlete, and all around just awesome person, good friend of mine. Welcoming to the show for the very first time, Wendy Fortino. Welcome, Wendy.
Hello. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah, I got to be your hype person.
I know. I love it. I love me a good hype man.
Yeah. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to, hop on and chop it up with us here. I know you and I have been wanting to collab for quite some time. And usually you're the one doing the interviews. Today, I get to do the interview as we chop it up.
I know. It's weird, but on the other side of it, I'm like, ooh, answer questions? What?
Oh, for real. And, I was actually really inspired. So later, as we're talking through, I want to hear more about the story that I just heard you tell in LA we were at the Career Lab by Coach 360. Both of us were able to get out there and do our thing on stage. And originally, I had no idea you were going to be there. So it was like, it was cool. Like, the universe works in funny ways. But you told an awesome story that we're going to talk about, when we transition from track to trophies. Right, going from that background in collegiate track and field to bodybuilding. Let's maybe start there. Let's go back to the beginning, Wendy. Let's talk about those athletic roots. Yes. And also, as we're talking, we're going to do some weaving here because I sometimes forget you have a twin sister. Right?
I do.
And I want to talk about that dynamic too of even coming up in the same household, you would think you would like the exact same things, but sometimes one turns out to be a bodybuilder and one turns out to do something totally different. So let's start there. Athletic roots, where did that track and field background start for you prior to bodybuilding all those years ago?
Yeah, I've always been really athletic my whole life, believe it or not. And growing up, I have 2 sisters and we all started with gymnastics. Okay. And as we continued through, my twin sister, she ended up being a diver. So she was diving in high school and I found out that I was really fast. So I just started running track. And my older sister, she went on to do gymnastics and she ended up competing in college gymnastics. So we all 3 branched off into our own things and we were all 3 really athletic. And I think we all were like good at gymnastics. We're all good at like all the things that we were doing, but I think that we wanted to be able to have our own autonomy. Like we all want to have our own thing. My twin sister and I were fraternal. We're not identical. So, we have complementary strengths and weaknesses, I guess you could say. I'm a lot more like artistic and a lot more like I have like that kind of problem solving, creative kind of way about me. My twin sister, she owns a law practice. She's very, type A. She has a photographic memory. She's very studious, very focused, very, and so that was interesting because I kind of played a role in kind of how we evolved and developed also. But the interesting thing is my sisters are both very athletic. So it's like, even though I went off and did more athletic type things in my life, it's like I have 2 very badass, very athletic sisters, In fact, my twin sister, she ended up she was on American Ninja Warrior twice.
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew that. How cool is that?
So she was on American Ninja Warrior twice. She also is a badass CrossFit competitor. And after having 3 kids, I got her to step on stage twice. So she did compete in bikini and everything. So yeah, I guess that's a long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. That's what we want to hear about. So it sounds like a little bit of the genetics, the athletic gene runs in the family, but this is a perfect example too of like genetics or talent by itself doesn't
Yeah.
really do much for us unless we develop it, consistently over a period of time. So that's really cool to see how that, genetics kind of transpired with, each trying to find your own identity and then ultimately trying different sports.
Definitely.
So did you ever think about doing the American Ninja Warrior yourself? Did you ever apply?
So I did actually helped her with her application. I remember I edited her video for her, and I was I was all about Team Jenny. It's my twin sister's name. I think that I would have been honestly really good at it. However, my hands and my grip strength had deteriorated so much from my gymnastics background and just in general, when I started lifting weights and everything, I don't know, I just got really bad wrists and hands, and my grip strength was just not good. You know what I mean? So I for that reason, I just don't think American Ninja Warrior was in the cards for me, because you got to have really good grip strength for that. You got to be jumping on things with your arm, with your hands and your wrists. And it wasn't something that I was going to be able to do. So yeah.
Yeah. It's a different type of training, right? It's performance training, but it's like really functional, not necessarily stuff you would use in everyday life, right? But it's things that you got to prepare for, totally different than what we do here in the sport of bodybuilding. Let's go back to your track and field days there. Maybe give us a little bit of background on, how long were you in track? I know a little bit about your story from hearing you speak at the Coach 360 event, but let's share that story. I think it's such a beautiful story, and it really sets up the conversation of how did we then transition into the sport of bodybuilding.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with this. So when I was given the opportunity to be the closing keynote speaker at the Coach 360 event, the Career Lab, I really put a lot of thought into how I wanted to explain my life lessons and getting to this point where I feel like finding success comes with so much loss along the way. And I was trying to think about where that kind of started for me, and the reason why is because I remember very specifically, I remember being at a contest and I had an athlete competing, and she got second place in her class, and she was so upset. She threw her trophy on the ground, and she was just like, I've never lost anything in my life. She was devastated. And I said, you've never lost anything in your life. I said, how many times have you tried? And she just barely had ever competed in anything in her whole life. And it dawned on me that, for me personally, I had been an athlete since I was 7 years old. I've been an athlete my whole life. And I have fallen so many times that's literally why I can handle defeat so well, and it's not like I'm okay with it. It's just that I know how to deal with it. And I'm like, where was the root? How did I? And then it traced me back to this moment, very specific moment in my collegiate track career. And that's what I started my keynote on, is the story of me, my last indoor national track and field championships, NC2A. I was, my last opportunity to step on that indoor national track. And I think in my speech I said stage, because I can't with bodybuilding. I say stage, track, whatever. And I went out there and I was ready to run my heart out, and I had to get through preliminaries and then finals. And as you know, in preliminaries, I ended up getting disqualified. I cut in a little bit too early from the cone, and I was completely devastated. And I remembered, and I don't think I've completely gotten over that to this day. I still remember that moment so much, even after all the things I've been through in my life, all the wins, the losses, the defeats. Like, I always go back to that moment, and I just remember how devastating it was for me. And when I think about it over and over again, it still devastates me. And then I remember learning that lesson early in that moment that, people always say, don't get your hopes up, because if you get your hopes up and you don't get what you want, then what if you get let down? And I always think, well, how could it be worse than that? I got through that. I got on the other side of it. I got my hopes up, and the worst case scenario happened to me. So moving forward, like, I'm strong enough, I feel like, to handle anything. So that was kind of like where my whole, I guess, message sort of started. And then as I continued through my journey, there were like lesson after lesson to get to this moment where I feel so solidly resilient right now. And that doesn't mean that I'm okay with losing. It just means that that whatever happens, you can handle it. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's such a beautiful story too. And I love the way that you are able to tell that, because it really does keep you grounded. It's not about losing, we say fail forward or fall forward. It's really just about, are we able to learn from those? And we want to make sure we don't ever experience that again, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Do differently so that you don't ever experience that again. And I think that's part of like the issue too, even just with society, is like, we only see the glory. We don't see the grind behind the glory. And I'll use, my powerlifting days as an excellent example. I recently told this story to a friend, and like my whole powerlifting career prior to bodybuilding, my goal was, I remember when my goal was just to get to 300 pounds, but then it was 400. And then after 400, I'm like, man, one day I'd love to bench press 500 pounds. And that goal eluded me for like an extra 10 years. That's how long the gap was from like 400 to 500 pound on my bench press.
Wow.
And then one day I finally got it. And then it became pretty easy. I would hit that weight regularly. And what people don't see, right? They'll see like the clip of me doing that, and they're like, oh my God, Andre, you used to lift, bench press 500 pounds. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't see the like 10 to 12 years of failing that probably 500 times right before I ever was able to accomplish that one feat. So it's really like being relentless. Again, I think people get caught up also in like comparing their progress or how fast their wins are coming compared to other people, maybe in the sport. But they're not telling you the backstory or the losses. They're only sharing the glory.
Yeah, but then there's also this realization when you're in this moment of success. So you're in a moment where you accomplish something. And I think about, Ronnie Coleman's 8 Olympia titles, right? And then I think about, losing to Jay Cutler. And it's like, feel like there's this, I don't want to say there's a finality to success, but we do reach that peak. We reach the place where we have gotten to the top of our mountain, and we know that that's the top of our mountain, and we want to fully be in the moment and absorb it, because it's never forever. And I don't mean that to sound negative or bad or anything like that, but there are those moments where you really need to soak it in. You need to realize this is my absolute top of my mountain in this one thing. But that's that one thing, right? Because you get to the top of the mountain in that, and then you enter a new chapter. And that's kind of, in a weird way, that's almost where I feel like I'm at in my life right now. I feel like I have gone through so many chapters in my life getting to that top of my mountain in whatever I'm doing. And then I'm like, what's next? Like, what's my next chapter look like that I'm going to climb in that mountain? Right. So for you, like powerlifting, getting that lift, getting all those years under your belt, getting to that moment, and then like, this is such a huge accomplishment. You're at the top of your mountain, and then it's like, are you going to be able to continue to be a powerlifter at that level forever and ever? I mean, enjoying that moment, soaking it in, that's another part of the journey, right?
It is. It's being present, and I love that you reframe that as your mountain, right? Because we always think of it as the mountain, but your mountain might look totally different than my mountain or the next person's. And it really is a beautiful thing when you can reach your fullest expression, your fullest potential in that one thing. And that sets you up, right? Maybe that is your thing forever, but maybe it's not meant to be. Maybe that was just a jump off point for the next great adventure, right?
Right.
That's where it's amazing, I think, to use that, right? I mean, mine was like, that powerlifting journey took me as far as I could go in that sport. There was really nothing left for me to do that would benefit me at that point. But it set the groundwork and foundation for me to then jump straight into physique and bodybuilding and have a really illustrious career there, which then set up the next chapter that I'm currently in, right? Which is business ownership, coaching, and all the fun stuff that we do here in entrepreneurship. So yeah, it's that mountain is constantly changing. It's moving, it's evolving, but I love the way that you frame that. Wendy, some things I want to definitely share with our followers. I want to do a little deep dive. You and I'll chop it up on training here. So let's talk about some staples, some fundamentals. What are maybe some core principles of yours that have stood the test of time? And don't limit it to just bodybuilding. We can go back to even thinking about how your track and field days maybe laid that groundwork, right, for discipline and consistency. And how did that, translate into some of your staples in bodybuilding?
Well, I'm going to start here because I think this is the best place to start when it comes to creating something with your physique. And then this is kind of like starting on the surface, and then we'll kind of like go deep, because I feel like, a lot of people, especially everything's so fast paced now. I mean, when I first started competing in figure, for example, it was significantly less muscle mass that was being rewarded in the figure division. And I've had the luxury of being able to evolve as the division has gotten crazier and crazier. Right. So my years of experience have kind of bode well for the evolution of the division, which I'm so grateful for. But with everybody wanting to be so fast paced, one thing that I will say is when I first started training, I am a mesomorph. So I put on muscle very, very fast, very, very easily. And at least I did when I was in my early 20s, right? I've developed a lot now. I mean, I think at that time in my life, when I first started competing, I was definitely building muscle really fast. And because I hadn't mastered the movement patterns quite yet, I was just training heavy, training hard, and my muscles were just going all over the place for no rhyme or reason. I had really developed traps, thick obliques. I mean, as a track athlete and a gymnast, you have certain muscle groups that develop that don't cater to a perfectly symmetrical physique, right? Athlete physiques are built for function, and aesthetic physiques are built for looks, not for function. Dysfunctional body versus functional body. I had a very functional body, very thick traps, very thick waist. My muscles were, and so when I started training, the muscles that were already developed were being recruited first. So I was more developing those muscles even more. So one thing that I will say is, when people say respect the process, that's the process. The process is treating every single movement like it's a skill. And when you are not finding the muscle group very specifically, that's going to create something, being able to take your ego out of the equation and say, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this exercise, and I may not be able to lift as heavy as I'm strong enough to lift, while I'm mastering the movement pattern and while I'm mastering the mind muscle connection, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create something. If I go as heavy as I'm capable of going, my body's going to kick in all the muscles that are already developed, already strong, and I'm going to look like a very functional, performance-based athlete, which is going to be badass in its own way, but it's not going to have that streamlined, X-frame look. And that's what I think I would say for anybody starting, or like the best advice I would give for somebody really like getting going in the journey, is that, and not everybody is a mesomorph. So some people, the slow pace is natural, and I would say they have the luxury of having to take the time anyway, because their body doesn't respond super fast. But most people that are designed to succeed in this sport are going to build muscle fast. Or they're going to be enhanced and build muscle fast because they're enhanced. So whether you're naturally inclined to build muscle or you enhance yourself to build muscle, if you haven't mastered the movement patterns, your body's going to, grow in its own way without having the rhyme or reason that you want it to have by mastering the movements. So I'll start there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there. It's really about being very intentional with the types of movements, the types of training, right? What body parts are we focusing on? And then also really settling into what the criteria for your specific division is. That's where also, coaches, judges, feedback, all that stuff's going to help guide them. But I love that you touched that, Wendy, because if you think about, let's take the most extreme example, like an Andrea Shaw, right? Or a Ronnie Coleman. They could really develop their physique the wrong direction so quickly and easily if they're not careful, right? So everyone always thinks, man, I wish I had just like a straight up mesomorph, genetics or physique. Can be awesome if you are training properly, but if you're not, you can get yourself into some trouble.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. It's funny because I haven't really I don't have like significantly more muscle right now than I had like in my first like 6 months. The first 6 months that you start lifting weights, that's when you put the most, that's like the beginner's gains or whatever they call it, right?
Newbie gains, yep.
Newbie gains. I had the most gains in that first 6 months that I started training with weights. And I haven't really put on a significantly more amount of muscle since then, but it looks totally different because when I first started building, it was, like I said, it was all over the place. Like the way my back was developed, the way that my body was, everything was based off of what my body already wanted to recruit. And then that's what happened. And it's funny because after my first year of competing, I actually spent a good 3 to 4 years trying to atrophy muscles, like training less, like staying away from weights and a lot of exercises, just while I was trying to take things down and then build other things up. So I had to avoid. That was part of me respecting the process. Like, I mean, I was certain muscles I just literally didn't train. I was trying to really get my body, and I had a good eye too. I'm very artistic. So as soon as I started getting involved in the sport and I was studying my physique, I was studying the physiques that had the flow. I started like picking up on, okay, I need a little bit more of this. I need to take a little bit of that away. Okay, to create this is what I have to do. And then that's what I would do. That's what I would take to the drawing board as an artist, using my body as a canvas. I put so much into what I was creating, that obsessive kind of personality that I have, whether it's training for track, trying to get to the Olympics, or training for bodybuilding. It was always about putting everything that I have into creating what I'm trying to create.
Yeah, and it's crazy. You're spot on, right? Our bodies, our physiques, that's our masterpiece. And we are artists, but instead of using clay and sculpting this perfect physique, we have to do it through blood, sweat, and tears and dieting, right? And it can be a lot more challenging. But to your point, just being very strategic with what muscles we're training. You can even use some corrective exercise to try and inhibit or deactivate overactive muscles. And, when we say it through the NASM context, right, overactive muscles lead to muscle imbalances and eventually training injuries. But we're also saying it from an aesthetic perspective here in the sport of bodybuilding, where overactive muscles, let's take the upper traps. If they're overdeveloped, or for your division, Wendy, right, for figure, if your biceps and triceps are too developed, they're going to make your shoulders look proportionally small, right, where we don't have the nice round caps and proportions we want. And so it's like, we can't just lift, everything with high intensity. We have to be really smart about it. And I think most people tend to train like muscles that respond really fast. They tend to train those first, right? For me, back in the day, it was my chest, right? And that was me, right? I had the huge bench press, and I loved powerlifting, and that muscle grew really easy. But what didn't grow easy were my legs. I had huge calves naturally, but my quads and hams grow a lot slower. So I had to actually really, when I switched to classic, I had to blast them 2 to 3 times a week, almost like today's like a wellness competitor would train their legs, but that's a hard thing to master. Like, what advice do you have for people in that scenario? I think even our bikini competitors, I'll get so many that are jacked up top, and it's like, all right, girl, we got to bring your glutes up, right? We got to bring your hamstrings up, and actually you cannot get any bigger up top. So
the muscles we use for daily activity are the ones that we are able to activate so easily. Biceps, I mean, we're picking up things, you pick up your groceries or whatever, your biceps they're going to be so easy for you to find. So when you do, and that feels good, like it feels good to get a pump, which is why it's like, gosh, like you go to the gym and you can feel your biceps. So it feels so good because you that feeling of getting a pump. Whereas muscle groups that can be really frustrating for people are like the shoulders. I mean, you can feel some of like almost like a vague sensation, but you're not connecting, and that can get really frustrating, right? So let's say you're doing side raises, you're doing shoulder presses, and you're like, God, it's like I feel there's something happening there, but I'm not connecting. Then you just go and you resort to the things that you've like because we're craving that pump, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that it just goes to show that, people want to be really heroic, and they see people like girls. I see girls all the time. They don't have really well developed shoulders, and I see them doing like 50-pound shoulder presses. I mean, I don't think I've ever gotten over like maybe like 30 pounds. I'll do like more volume, because as soon as I go higher, there's a point of no return. When I do lateral raises, I don't think I've ever done lateral raises with anything heavier than like 15 to 17.5, because again, I'll do different training principles to get more blood in the area, because as soon as I start going heavier than that, I go up to 20, I can't even find that anymore. I'm like all over the place. I'm kicking in whatever it takes. I'm strong enough to lift it. I'm strong enough to lift probably 30 pounds or more even in a lateral raise, but I'm not connecting to my muscle, and I'm not trying to just be heroic. I want to get round shoulders. So how do I get that? Is I'm tempering my strength with the fact that I'm really trying to create something. And so I would say it can be frustrating. And if you're frustrated, don't worry, you're not alone. Just remember what your goal is. And if your goal is to create, you have to be able to deal with some of that frustration and make your priority to truly connect to the muscle.
Yeah, and that's definitely more important than just heaving around a bunch of weight, because to your point, this isn't powerlifting, right? This is bodybuilding, and we have to get surgical. Now, in the beginning, sure, we're going to do a lot more closed kinetic chain movements, heavy compounds, especially if you tend to be more on the ectomorph or ectomesomorphic, side of the genetic pool. Then we actually want those heavier loads, compound movements. But once you've got that initial base, let's take a bikini competitor or even fit model is probably even more exaggerated example today, where they can't get too muscular, right? But they still need to make small improvements. They still need projection on their glutes and enough density so that the glutes are firm, right? They need enough shape on the shoulders without having hard caps. And so now we're starting to get surgical with really isolated movements, nice and controlled, like you said, moderate weights. And then you guys can use different intensifiers for this, right? Without increasing the weight. You could do supersets where maybe it's an agonist, agonist, or you could do agonist, antagonist, compound agonist, right? There's all these different methods that we can intensify an exercise without, necessarily resorting to just blasting with more weight.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a couple of things that go into that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No. I was going to ask if you have, speaking of that, do you have any favorite movements?
Oh, favorite movements. Well, here's what I was going to say is I feel like, to your point, it's interesting because, and the way that the fit model division is going to evolve is going to be an interesting one, because there are a lot of women that build muscle easier than they realize, right? And that's going to be a very specific division that's going to cater to women who are really hard gainers and they have a very specific body type, kind of like that supermodel, lean-esque kind of physique and frame, where like no matter how hard and how heavy they lift, their bodies are just a certain, they're gonna like tap out a certain place. And so women are gonna start training and think they're in that category, and their bodies are going to start responding, and then the judges are going to kind of flow with that, where what gets rewarded is going to kind of flow from that, right? And so it really depends on the person in terms of what movements are going to be ideal. If somebody has been an athlete, if somebody has been let's say a female who has been a soccer player her whole life, she has muscle fibers in her quads and her hamstrings and her glutes that have developed early on in life that are going to respond more so than somebody who does not have that background. The muscles are going to have memory, and they're going to evolve, and they're going to develop in a certain way. She may outclass herself from like a fit model or bikini even, and end up in wellness as soon as she starts training, right? So doing glute specific exercises with cables and kickbacks, doing isolated movements, unilateral on leg press, focusing on quads, hamstrings, glutes, all those things are going to be ideal for the fit model girl. But like I said, if she has a background in sports and her legs are going to be super responders, she may outclass herself. So I guess, seeing how the body responds and having somebody who's able to be there watching you and observing you is going to be important too. And knowing what you respond the best to.
Mhm.
It's such a personalized approach when you're talking about creating and building a physique, which this. I mean, we have in performance-based sports, there are certain drills and movement patterns that everyone must master if you want to be a good golf player. Every athlete must master if you want to be a good baseball player. Every athlete must master if you want to be a good basketball player. Everyone who plays that sport must master these movement patterns, right? In a physique aesthetic sport, everyone has different set of muscle groups that evolve in different ways. And so being able to observe that, figure out like how the body's going to respond, and then plan accordingly as an artist, it's a very unique, specific uh, uh, situation. So
Yeah. So, and that's, again, that's one of the most important things, is just making sure that the type of training you're implementing
yeah,
is strategic for your physique. And for us, like, we're not doing it alone. We've got our coaches' input. To your point, like, and I think all competitors should do this. Like, you guys should study the game yourself too. Don't just rely on your
yes,
coach.
yeah,
Like, look at the current Olympia champion. What you should not do is look at your regional overall champion.
yeah,
That's
I know.
that one too much. Where they're like, "Well, coach, I look nothing like this girl." I'm like, "Yeah, okay. There were 3 girls in that
I
competition.
know, right?
Not a good example." But if you guys are ever confused,
That's a whole nother conversation right there. Yeah.
it is. So look at the Olympia champion. That's always going to be your standard. But if you look at the first few pro shows of every year, it's a pretty good proxy of what the judges are going to be looking for, and that's going to trickle down into what the standard should look like, even at the amateur and the regional level too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Wendy, I want to dive into some nutrition staples. So, this is one that, it's always fun to talk about, because nutrition can look wildly different and still be successful for different people, right? Different body types. I mean, I laugh. Like, I remember having a conversation with Drea, and, when she's in that stretch for Olympia, I mean, this girl's eating like just tilapia and red bell peppers. And I'm like, how are you still full? Like, how are your muscles still full? Like, I would be flat as a board doing cardio and training with, like, but this is where the genetics come into play. So, I like to preface this by just, reinforcing that consistency is always going to be king here, over extremes, right? We shouldn't get to a point where we have to do extreme dieting. If you do, that might mean that you just needed a longer prep, or we got more work to do. But, Wendy, let's start here. What things have stayed the same since your early days in the sport, and what things have really evolved for you over the past 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. I'll start by saying this, that everyone is different. Everyone is unique. But I think this is a commonality that I see a lot of women have after working with a lot of different people over a lot of years. A lot of women have digestive issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
We, as soon as we start eating high volume, high fiber, high protein, it becomes more tricky to assimilate all that nutrition. And digestion is a big factor, because if you're busy digesting food and you feel bloated and you feel full, it will affect your training. It's going to affect your mood. It's going to affect a lot of different things. So that was something early on that I really wanted to master. I want to figure out how to alleviate my digestive issues that I was having. Also, another thing I realized over time is if your stomach is bloated for too long over a long period of time, it's harder to control it, and controlling your waist is a huge part of succeeding. You need a tiny, tiny waist. You need to be able to control it, and you don't want it to feel uncomfortable all the time. So for me personally, I have discovered that, and one of the reasons I can get away with this is because I do have a lot of muscle that has been on my body and it doesn't want to go anywhere. So I would say, the luxury of being able to do this without losing muscle, which is something that, you have to realize this could potentially cause you to lose muscle. I will go for a very long period of time before I have my first meal. I'll usually eat my first meal at like 11 o'clock. And that fasting period, it allows my digestion, my enzyme activity, everything kind of level off. And I've found my digestion is just so much better when I go that long period of time in the morning into the early afternoon without eating. And then I'll have my first meal, and I do get a lot of electrolytes. I rarely drink just plain water. I'll do water with electrolytes, sodium, magnesium, potassium in my fluids a lot, like throughout the day, just to make sure that I don't lose any minerals. Some people, they drink so much water that you're actually flushing out a lot of the things that help you with your digestion. So that's one thing so digestion for me has been really huge. And then the staples that everybody knows about, you can't really get away from the fact that you need a lot of protein, you need a lot of healthy fats. And then to fill yourself up, if you're feeling hungry, you need to eat a lot of volume, lots of vegetables and fruits if you're able to have the extra carbs. But, nothing really fancy there. That's pretty much standard practice. And when I go to bed at night, before I go to bed at night, when I have my last meal, it's mostly always going to be either salmon or steak or ground beef, something with a lot of protein, a lot of fat, because while I sleep, and knowing that I'm going to wait a while before I eat my first meal the next day, the fat helps to slow the absorption of that protein overnight. So that just, that helps me really take advantage of what I do consume in my last meal. So I think that's pretty much my long-winded answer to my diet go-to. How's that?
Yeah, no, that works perfect. And I see a lot of, common things that we would want to implement, and definitely the rationale behind it, right? If we just kind of break down that basic framework throughout the day, generally giving yourself a little bit longer window for intermittent fasting. Technically, everyone on this planet is intermittent fasting while they're sleeping, right? So breakfast is breaking the fast, but you're giving yourself that extra few hours to really give the, digestive system a break, because especially if we're in an improvement phase, by the way, guys, because we're really slamming a lot of calories there. And especially over the course of multiple weeks or months, sometimes you got to pull back and just give your GI, your entire system a break. So not a bad idea there. Carbohydrates, think about front loading those earlier in the day, definitely timing them pre, intra, post workout, so that we're getting the right anabolic signaling that we're trying to achieve for muscle growth. And then, later in the evening, kind of depends on what the goal is for that phase, right? Are we in a fat loss phase? Are we in a bulking phase? Do you have issues with fasted glucose where we need to stabilize blood sugar? So, Wendy, you mentioned, even stacking, like a slow assimilating protein, like a salmon or beef, maybe with some fats. I would definitely add some veggies, some fiber in there, right? And that's going to help slow things down. One thing that I'll even recommend is, adding a little bit of GDA or berberine with, your last 1 to 2 meals in the evening to also slow down and just kind of regulate blood sugars. And then you got to hear a little bit at the NPC Women's Workshop just a couple of weeks ago, where myself and Dr. Indy were talking about fast and slow oxidizers for HTMA mineral balancing.
Yeah.
And that's a big one. So I know we're getting you set up for a test as we speak. So keep a lookout in the mail. But that's a game changer, because that tells us if your body and whatever metabolic state you're currently in, are you going to respond better to carbs or fats, right? If we're in metabolic fast oxidation, we need fats to actually layer in and slow down, calm down the thyroid and the adrenals, so that we're not churning through specific minerals at such a high rate. Versus if we have a bit of, let's say hypothyroidism type symptoms, we have slow oxidizer protocol. That's going to be very low in fats. We don't want to slow anything down. We actually want some of the energy uppers. We want more, much higher carbohydrates in the diet to actually speed up. It's like we're pouring fuel on the fire, right? We want to speed up the thyroid and adrenals. So that's another thing that as we learn more, as we apply more, and then we start learning like different body types, it's like a light bulb goes off, and we can understand why, our bodies respond to different things over time. Yeah, and I don't know if I shared with you, Wendy, your metabolic oxidation type actually can shift, and it will shift over time as well.
Yeah. I will say this, and this is something I told you when I saw you, is that it's crazy, including myself, how many people do not know what's going on with their bodies, right? Yeah. People who don't get blood work, people who don't check and see what's going on with, their hormone levels, their blood glucose. Like I check my blood glucose on a regular basis actually, and my blood pressure. And it's like you could assume that you know where that stuff is, but I have found that just knowing how my blood sugar is responding throughout the day and different things, it's tracking something that gives you a feedback loop. I think that I just like knowing what your body is doing, knowing what's going on with it. And that is power. Knowing what's going on with your body is absolutely the superpower that you need in order to equip yourself to do the things that you need to do to succeed the most. And it's going to surprise you sometimes. I mean, I think some people may not realize, when their blood sugar is spiking, when it's dropping, and what's causing that to happen, and what is causing your body to, be resistant on certain results that you want to have. There is a lot to be said about knowing what's going on with your body, and getting something like this, which is a more advanced version of what I've done with just getting my blood work, is exciting, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're just as excited to, help you figure out what your body responds best to. And it's going to make so much sense when you start to see the difference. And it's like, that's why my body feels this way. This is why I crash at 2 p.m. every afternoon and I run out of energy. You're going to just learn a lot, and you can get a lot more strategic with both your macronutrition and your micronutrition. And then of course our supplements, right? It's like we all start to accumulate way too many supplements throughout the year, where maybe you had a vitamin complex in there, and you had like a basic fat burner, you got some creatine, some aminos, some protein isolate. And then as the years go by, you're like, well, dang, I've got like 3 cabinets full of supplements. How many of these should I still be taking? Are these even right for me? And this is where doing something like a mineral test will definitely go a long way. One thing I want to dive into with you, Wendy, is longevity, because I think we're both really good walking examples of how to take care of your body so that you can stay healthy, not just in the sport, but also just in your daily quality of life, right? Because the reality is we're not going to be elite athletes for forever, right? That's a finite chapter in our lives. And we've probably rode that horse longer than most people can. But the reality is, we got to think about longevity. And this was something that I thought about very early in my career. Not to say I didn't take risks, but I always took measured risks with my training, especially as a power lifter, but even in bodybuilding, right? You don't want to push too hard down the stretch and hit overreach or burn out. So I'll share a couple things that have worked with myself and a lot of the athletes that I coach. And I'd love to hear from you on, your thoughts on recovery and deloads and stuff like that. So a couple quick things that we do on a daily and weekly basis. We monitor our biomarkers. So anyone that's got a smart wearable, I've got my Garmin Sapphire. Some people have Oura rings, Apple Watch Fitbits. We like to collect data. So I'll look at overnight HRV, heart rate variability. We'll look at resting heart rate, steps, Whoop scores, sleep quality. All of these things are going to be good indicators if that athlete is recovering properly, or if they happen to be approaching overreach and burnout. And so for me, when we see that, we get really strategic with our high carb refeeds. If we see biomarkers trending the wrong way for more than 3 consecutive days, we might even move up a rest day, hit them with 30 to 40 grams of extra carbs and hydration to make sure that we don't run our bodies into the ground on prep. So with that in mind, what things helped you and still continue to help you in terms of recovery? Do you take regularly scheduled deload periods? And what does that look like for you, Wendy?
Actually, I would say the thing that helps me the most is, I think, something that a lot of people probably can observe if you see me around. And that is that I stay in very good shape all the time. I've never had a bulking phase in the entire time I've been competing. I've never bulked up. I've never gained a bunch of weight. But honestly, one of the reasons why I've never done that is because I actually have a very severe case of endometriosis. If you don't know about it, it's just like really bad inflammation in your uterine lining. There's like a whole thing that I've had to suffer with. And foods that are like high in sugar and processed can cause severe inflammation for everybody, right? I mean, we have an immune response to highly processed sugared foods anyway. But when you have something like endometriosis, it can cause really bad pain flare-ups. And so that's always been a huge motivator for me, because as soon as I like put on just like a little bit of, extra weight or whatever, I get really bad pain episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So I have lasted so long. A lot of it is the reason why I've lasted so long is because I have stayed in such good shape, and I've just never like gotten to the point where I've had to go into like an extreme dieting phase. And I don't know if I always say, God, am I strong enough mentally to be able to diet really, really hard? Like the like no carb type thing where you're just totally suffering. I'm like, am I strong enough to do that? I don't know. If I had to lose like 30 pounds or something, would I be able to do that? I don't know. But I think that is something that some people are strong enough to do, but it will definitely diminish the amount of time that you're going to be able to have longevity in the sport and beyond. I mean, let's be honest, if you go through a lot of yo-yoing in your life, it gets harder and harder, and your body is less responsive. Your hormones are less balanced. You throw your ecosystem off to the point where it's working against you and not for you, and you have a lot more to fix. And so the more you can maintain that homeostasis, the more you can keep yourself level as possible, the longer you're going to last, the better you're going to feel. And that's honestly the best advice I could possibly give for longevity.
I love it. We've actually got an episode, Wendy, on set point theory that I dropped a while back, and it speaks to exactly those points on our bodies, really responding and getting used to staying at a certain relative percent body fat or body composition, carrying a certain amount of muscle and mass. And, if we stay at any position long enough, that's our set point. It's actually hard to go up or down from there because your body wants to, just normalize that. And you've done such a phenomenal job kind of maintaining where you're at. And I'm the same way. I mean, I've only competed a few times in the last few years. Just been enjoying life. We still got the rocks in there. And, it's just something that if you're consistent, that muscle, like those cells, those fibers, they're not going anywhere, right? If you're still enjoying your training and still staying relatively consistent, just making, good, consistent decisions with your nutrition, it's really not hard to stay there. So I know Ashley Kaltwasser is another excellent example. So shout out to Ashley. Like we always talk about this, and that girl stays within like 5 pounds of her stage weight.
And her and I are like spirit animals.
You are. So and it does you a world of wonders when you're back on prep, though. It makes prep so much easier than having to burn through, 30, 40 pounds. So last thing we're going to leave our followers with today, Wendy, we're going to touch on some motivation, because you and I feel like we're pretty motivating people. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but we'll start with staying driven long term. And how that motivation evolves, right, as we get older or as we progress through our career. So what things have maybe helped you stay motivated all these years and given you purpose even beyond the trophies?
Yeah. There's two different types of motivation. There's motivated, and then there's motivational, right? And I think they do go hand in hand when you're in the motivational stage. And here's what I mean. If you are, let's say you're training for a contest and you're in your peak physical condition, you're 3 weeks out and you are on top of the world. You feel like I can do this forever. You feel so good. You wake up and you look in the mirror and you're like, I feel so good. I'm at my best. You are in your most highly motivational state. And those are the people that go on Instagram and they do the quotes and they, you gotta want it more than you want to breathe. And they're so motivational and they spew all the words and everything like that. Not bad. I'm not dissing that, because I do that too. Right. But we're the most motivational when we feel good about ourselves and we feel on top of the world ourselves, right? Where that starts to fall, I would say, is on the other side of that. When somebody does the show, they're on the other side of that. They've had their carb up and their cake and their cookies and their pizza after the show, and all of a sudden they gain a little bit of weight and they feel down, and the post-contest blues set in, and that's where they don't want to talk to anybody. The motivational state is on the downswing, right? And that's where they look to the people that are maybe in that place for the motivation. And there's a lot of that to be had, right? I mean, it's everywhere. But we go through those ebbs and flows, I feel, of the needing motivation to being motivational ourselves. People and you and I, people in our shoes, it's like we've gotten to a point in our careers where people turn to us a lot. So we have to find that ability to stay in that highly motivational state as much as we possibly can, so that we can make sure that we're that for as many people as possible. And like I said from my answer before, same goes here, is that if I'm staying in a place where I feel like I'm walking the talk and I feel good about myself, I know that I'm more likely to stay in that motivational state that I need to be in order to have the type of impact and be able to be the leader that I feel I need to be,
Right. And I think, when you talk about like the external validation, it's awesome to win. Like, let's be real. We all love us some winning.
Of course.
But the reality is it's a fleeting feeling, right? It's like a temporary high. It's always fleeting. You try to hold on to it and be as present and absorb it. But the reality is,
talking about that's if you do win. I mean,
if you do win, right?
You're getting blues even if you do win. To your point, like you're gonna have post contest blues whether you get last place or first place. So that's happening no matter what.
Yeah, and when you get last place, it's just amplified, right?
It's just worse. It's even worse.
Motivation is just non-existent at that point, and that's where we have to shift the mindset, right? Our jobs as athletes and coaches is shifting from the external validation to the intrinsic motivation, which is grounded really in process-driven goals instead of outcome-based goals, right? And that's something we actually teach in our PBC course too, because we're always thinking about, people sign up and take the coaching course or certifications because they want to learn nutrition, they want to learn training. But the reality is we need to learn behavioral change. And that comes from the way that we think about our motivation and ourselves. So, again, grounding ourselves in process-driven goals every day. What are these like 10 habits that I got to check the box on every day? And I'm going to focus on that rather than focusing on winning first place and winning that outcome. It's more of an infinite mindset of, getting the job done every single day.
Yes, I'm only going to push back on this. I actually think that for me personally, there's a certain amount of that kind of downswing that I have learned to embrace. And I feel like I'm never going to be able to solve that problem. And I have come to realize that maybe I don't want to, because that is part of the journey, that, going into a challenge and having those high highs and maybe some low lows. I have spent so much of my life trying to fix that. Like, how do I fix the lows that that come with trying to hit like such a peak level of operation in life? And I have gotten to this point in my life where not only do I think it's not necessarily possible to find a solution, but I don't know if I necessarily want to, because like I also said in my keynote presentation, it's like that is part of the journey, and it's part of what I've learned to embrace to attack the next challenge with the vigor. Right. So there's so you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, as cliche as it sounds, it's really about falling in love with that process. Right. And that process.
I don't think that's cliche. That's 100%.
It is. It's that process of reaching our goals, and it's doing the work in that process that we have to fall in love with. And then you'll be undeniable, unstoppable there. But if we only focus on the outcome, that motivation, there's going to be days where it's just pure heart, it's pure discipline, it's not fun. But again, if we're just focusing on really taking those next steps, and like you said, use whatever you have to, make it personal with yourself, right? If you got to use a loss to give you perspective and get you motivated to come out of that loss and achieve greatness, then use it, right? That's all leverage, and anything you can do to tap into greatness.
Yep, absolutely. I'm motivated right now. Let's go.
I'm going to go hit the gym right now. I actually am going to go hit the gym. I love it. So Wendy, we are just about out of time, but I want to make sure that our followers can connect with you. So let's drop your Instagram, YouTube, anywhere you want our followers to circle back with you.
I'm Wendy Fortino at Wendy Fortino. That's Fortino. Some people put 14-0. I don't know why, but it's a name. Okay. That sounds like and then my website with my husband is cyberbodyshop.com. That's our coaching business. And then I do, I do media on Muscle and Fitness. So you can find me on the Muscle and Fitness YouTube channel. You can find me on the Olympia TV YouTube channel, where I do a lot of hosting and content there. And some awesome series that I've created on the Wolfpack YouTube channel, which you can find there as well. And yeah, you find me at events, right? We're on the world tour together. So if you happen to be at any upcoming fitness related events, you'll probably see me there. I'm going to be at the Arnold. I'll be doing media for Rain Nutrition there. And yeah, I'm all over the place. So you'll find me everywhere.
Awesome. Well, I know you and I will connect. Like, it's inevitable. So we'll definitely be following up, and we've got some other exciting stuff. Who knows? Maybe later this year we'll circle back and announce some more fun things to come. You and I, you know what I'm talking about.
Only you and I know. Only you and I know.
All right, Wendy. Well, we truly appreciate you. And guys, you already know where to find me online. You can find me on Instagram at AndreAdams_official. You can find me by email, trainingbydre@gmail.com. And then either of my websites, AndreAdamsOfficial.com or TeamAdamsPrep.com. Guys, thank you as always for tuning in. Hopefully you're motivated, you're fired up to go hit the gym, go do some meal prep and get in shape. We will see you guys next time here on the Peak Physique Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Peak Physique Podcast. Subscribe for elite strategies and cutting-edge insights from IFBB Olympian Andre Adams.